Welcome once again to another edition of Strange Planet. Thanks as always for sticking me in your ear. And if you'd like to get deeper into Strange Planet, you might want to consider becoming a premium subscriber. Just go to strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm, strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm. There are 3 monthly subscription tiers to choose from. Choose the one that's right for you. You get lots of bonus material. You get my monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum, free, delivered right to your email inbox every month. You get commercial-free listening, discounts on Strange Planet merchandise, and bonus episodes as well. strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm. All right, check out these headlines. Military whistleblower claims U.S. has UFO retrieval program. Las Vegas family claims to see aliens after several reports something falling from the sky. It seems like the whole UFO ET phenomena is really ramping up. Why is that? Well, we're going to get into that. The UFO phenomenon perhaps is the evidence of the War of Angels, culminating in the Battle of Armageddon and the Second Coming of Christ. Is that where it's headed? And then we're going to get into that right now with Ali Siaditan, founder of Think Again Productions here in Canada, a multimedia teaching ministry shedding light on mysteries and treasures of scriptural knowledge, which is making the Bible more real than ever. He is the producer of a groundbreaking documentary called UFOs Angels and Gods that was released way back in 2006. Again, Think Again Productions, thinkagainproductions.com is the website. Ali Siaditan, welcome back. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for having me, Richard. People can watch the documentary, for free on the website. And if they want to leave a donation at the bottom of the page, they can.
And it'd been about 15 years since I've seen the documentary, and I sat down and I watched it again with fresh eyes this afternoon. And I think it needs to be re-released and because it's never been more timely. Everything that you said or that is brought forth in that documentary seems to ring so true today, maybe even more than back then, as we appear to be heading into the end times. But let me ask you, because, and I don't think I've ever asked you this, I know that you're a fan of the late Dr. Michael Heiser, who wrote a lot about the Book of Enoch, and of course, aside from Genesis 6, we learn about the Nephilim in the Book of Enoch. L.A. Marzulli, who's been a frequent guest on this program. I know you're a fan of L.A.'s. Also, Stephen Quayle. I've never had the pleasure of interviewing Stephen, but he's a frequent guest on Coast to Coast. All of you sort of dabbling in the same arena. But what differentiates you, Ali, from Marzulli, Dr. Heiser, and Stephen Quayle?
Well, I think the work that everyone's doing to bring the different pieces of this puzzle from a biblical point of view is very, very precious. I had a UFO sighting in the deserts of Iran in 1999 that really accelerated me looking into all of this. And there wasn't a lot of people out there that I could read about who were writing about this. There was Chuck Missler, who I interviewed for the documentary. He written Alien Encounters. And as kind of the Lord, I think, led us into discovering the piece of the puzzle, one thing that we unearthed was this concept that we may talk about of the Elohim, which is essentially a term in the Bible that refers to God and angels, and including fallen angels. The whole kind of, even spirits, it refers to the whole world. And I found, hundreds of passages. I've never sat down and counted them. I have all my printouts here. When Dr. Heiser came out with his book, and he confirmed this idea that was the basis of a good part of the documentary. That's why the word Elohim is in the title of the documentary, UFOs, Angels, and Gods. I got a lot of hate mail from people saying, why did you use the word gods? People would upload my documentary and then cross it out and write demons, because that was actually a term in the actual Bible for fallen angels, I found. And the Lord led us to discover Deuteronomy 32, verse 8 and 9, so very foundational to all of this. And so that's one thing that distinguished me, I would say, from the gentlemen who were coming out of the days of Noah, which they were seeing this UFO phenomenon mainly as a redo of the events of before the flood, where the fallen angels created a civilization and created hybrids, that this was happening again in our time. And that was it. That was the connection. But this idea of the Elohim and the gods led me to see that, well, there was chariots involved in the Bible with the Elohim, that there were chariots involved in the tale of the gods from the nations. And this then shifted the focus more to the second coming itself, where the climax of the story was more about the true nature of the world of angels, the way the second coming was going to take shape and go down, which was very different from what the church had imagined. And the idea of modern day Nephilim and the days of Noah became then a piece of the puzzle, a piece of a much larger story that went into the gods and into the ancient world and climaxed at the second coming. So I think that the way we put the story together, and also the taking on the physical nature of the world of angels, that, you know what, there are, it seems, heavenly craft involved. I think these things perhaps distinguished us. As far as the gods and Dr. Heiser are concerned, his focus was mainly on how is it that this revelation applies to the finished work of Christ on the cross? How does this apply to the New Testament? My focus was, how does this revelation inform us concerning the second coming, the final redemption of the human race? So that was one big difference. And the fact that we discovered this, it wasn't really something that was coming at all out of our good friends who were talking about this and making a connection with the days of Noah. But again, it shifts the trajectory of the narrative. Now there's an entire arch created from the ancient world to modern times to the second coming, of which the creation of hybrids and the modern day UFO phenomenons, strange events of abductions and aliens and all that stuff, is a piece of a puzzle rather than what the entire puzzle is all about. So I think that's what made it groundbreaking, is it was how it was all put together. And it looks like, through the Holy Spirit, we solved the entire story and connected the ancient astronaut theory with the modern phenomenon, and prophetically where it was going. The whole entire thing was solved, and it was solved through the biblical concept of the Elohim, which was something people weren't really talking about until Dr. Heiser wrote his book. So I think it was a unique piece of it was a unique work, I think. And looking back, and you're right, many of the ideas that are in the documentary, whether it's the temple, the altar of Zeus, whether it's the Queen of Heaven, whether it's the battle of angels, and the physical reality of this whole thing, a lot of these things have been confirmed, including the whole revelation about the gods and the relationship of the fallen angels. And this actually gives me the confidence to speak, because it's not like I said these things and I was like, yeah, I know it. I gotta go and tell this to the whole world. I felt these things were coming to me from God, and I had a duty to share them with people. But I myself had trepidation, and appreciate confirmation. The fact that other people are coming out who are very intelligent and wise and well-read, and agreeing with these concepts, gives me the confidence to boldly go out and say, okay, so this is really from God. I can boldly speak these things. I bear it on my conscience, what I'm saying. So it's also been comforting for me to see that there's a multitude of voices gathering together and confirming this information. So that's also been helpful for me.
So if we are to frame this discussion in terms of the UFO phenomenon as part of Satan's great deception, the big lie, the final lie,
right?
Talk to me about that a little bit.
It's interesting, this idea that the Lord emphasizes when he's asked to talk about the end of the age. He says it'll be a time of great deception. He says, no, be aware not to be deceived. So he starts and ends his admonition with that statement in Matthew 24. And of course, the letter that Paul writes to Thessaloniki talks about a great lie, like the lie. People who didn't receive the truth will receive the lie. And of course, the adversary is presented as someone who speaks his natural tongue when he lies. So this idea, first of all, of deceit, even in the Old Testament, it says that he deceives the nations. Even in the book of Revelation, it says, is this the man who deceived the nations? So there is this running theme. Even the conversation between Satan and Eve is one in which Satan changes the nature of reality concerning this particular tree in the sight of Eve. He changes it. So this is a running theme in the Bible, that there is deception, but there's a climax of it. There's a great lie. And we found that the UFO phenomenon was being recast once we understood that this was, in fact, the manifestation of the world of angels into the physical creation, that it had ancient roots, that went all the way back to the birth of civilization, that this is, in fact, what the Bible explained. Once we understood that this was the true nature of the UFO phenomenon, then it became clear that when you looked at the propaganda and information coming out of this whole modern, apparently modern phenomenon, all as early as 1947, 48, it was that, you know what, ET has arrived. The aliens are here, they're visiting us, even though there's evidence of this throughout the ages and the Bible talks about it, even though the Bible says, no, this is actually the real manifestation of the world of angels, good and evil, because this propaganda was like, well, that's interesting. Why is it that these beings themselves, because the messaging was coming from them, it was coming through people who were saying that these guys have come to save us early on without any evidence, without any research. There was movies being made in Hollywood, like the Day the Earth Stood Still. And then there was mediums, people who were channeling. And you go, wait a second, channeling, that goes back to the book of Exodus. The book of Deuteronomy in the Bible. God forbids channeling because that's how the fallen angels and demons, speak to people. So it was like, wait, what's going on? Why is it that there is this messaging coming that ET has arrived and that they're here to save and rescue us? What's going on? And the answer was very simple. This is the beginning of a lie where the fallen angels are rebranding themselves as the aliens have arrived. And within that, they're branding themselves as the saviors of the human race. And so you kind of look back and you say, well, I'm going to watch this. I mean, I've been watching this for 20 years. I'm going to watch this and see whether, in fact, it goes there. And lo and behold, it goes there all the time. It's accelerating. And lately, since COVID and since what you mentioned in the beginning about this whistleblower, it suddenly exploded. The Disclosure Project of Stephen Greer is back, which I don't know if people know about that, but he's back suddenly talking to people. There's every day on the news, I see another American politician talking about this. And then the idea is already being floated around that there are two sides. Even a friend of mine who thinks this is all kooky, and for the first time he's taking it seriously, he said to me, wait, there are two sides, it seems. So even that idea is now being seeded into the culture, that there's good aliens and bad aliens. So this is all, once you have the biblical light as a backdrop that reveals the true nature of this phenomenon, that this is the manifestation of the world of angels. And I want to kind of just pause for a second on that, because at the beginning of the documentary, the narrator comes on and he says, could the UFO phenomenon be the empirical evidence of the world of angels? Something along those lines. I don't remember the exact words, but that's what he says. And it's, when I made the documentary, I couldn't express to the audience that now in my head, what I was saying was Elohim, even though I had to kind of translate that into a language that my audience understood. And that's very important, because this is the manifestation of what the Bible calls Elohim. You see, it's not a race from another planet. It is the term in the Bible used to talk about God, what we in English call the good angels and the bad angels, and even the spirits, even the demons. Therefore, in my head, I was saying, first of all, this phenomenon, as far as the Bible is concerned, is categorized as relating to the world of the angelic. I'm not saying at the beginning of the documentary, we're not saying this is good angels or bad angels. We're going to open that up. But I'm just saying when people hear angels, they say to me, "Oh, you mean fallen angels?" No, no, no. I'm not saying good or bad angels. I'm saying angelic. Just it's a term that defines this other, the other than man. There is this other, being involved. And so once you understand that, first of all, that this phenomenon is the evidence of the other, then suddenly when you look at the messaging, the propaganda that's coming, immediately you can discern that, wait a second, there's a deception at hand, because if this is the continuation of this ancient presence that goes back to the Garden of Eden, and we really have to open it up from the Bible for people to understand, then why is it that there's this very specific fictional nearly narrative being pumped into the culture that the ET has arrived like it's a new thing, that somehow they're here to save us? Oh, because there was the atomic explosions of Nagasaki and Hiroshima apparently attracted them. That's why they're all around nuclear silos, turning them off and on to tell everybody, look, guys, even the movie that Hollywood created, which was fascinating, that early on, such a movie would be created in the early 50s, and even before that, as early as 1947. I have a book here that talks about how there was an advisory board to the Pentagon trying to explain. Here, I've got it right here. It says, so where is it? 2 weeks later, Kenneth Arnold. If I can find it very quickly, I'll read it. But it's an advisory board that says early on to the Pentagon that, oh yes, they're here because they want to. The very problem was addressed in February of 1949 by astronomer George Valley, acting as a member of the Air Force Scientific Advisory Board. In a top secret report, it told the Pentagon its theories about the alien civilization that might well be coming to Earth. Such a civilization might observe that on Earth we now have atomic bombs and are fast developing rockets. In view of the past history of mankind, they should be alarmed. We should therefore expect at this time, above all, to behold such visitations. This idea that they've come to help us get over our warlike ways before we can join the galactic community is spoken as early as 1949. How could have anyone known what the intention of these beings are if they had just appeared on the stage of human history? As far as the larger world was concerned, people were seeing suddenly these things. And yet this messaging has expanded. Even Dr. Greer continues to mention
Right. So this is part of the deception. But does it, when we're talking about the UFO ET phenomena as evidence of the war of angels,
right?
The idea that has been planted, I guess, into our culture that, well, the aliens can't be angels because angels aren't physical in nature. They are supernatural. They're spiritual in nature. It's
Yes,
part of the
that's a
deception,
great
right?
point.
When did that start? How did that start?
That's a great point. So I'll read you a quote from Tertullian, who lived in the 2nd century, one of the early church fathers. He says, "Every spirit possesses wings. This is the common property of both angels and demons. So they are everywhere in a single moment. The whole world is as one place to them. It is easy for them to know everything that is done over the whole extent of the world and to report it." So Tertullian, he says, hey, angels and even spirits, they have wings and they can fly around. They're kind of like birds. Now, when you go back to the Constantine, who was a Roman emperor who said that he conquered Rome thanks to his vision of Christ, and he did the Edict of Tolerance in the 4th century, he said Christians can come out of hiding. As Christianity, which had become quite popular among Romans, and many Romans converted to this brand of essentially Jesus's brand of Judaism. That's what it really was, because they were coming out of polytheism and worshiping the God of Israel. they now needed to set up, and they wanted to also have art. They wanted to tell the stories of the Bible through art. And so a lot of the Roman pagan art was taken. For instance, when you look at the tombs of Romans, there's these two boys with bird-like wings holding a halo, and these are Nikes. These are transporters of the soul to the realm of the gods or the realm of the dead. And that's what the globe they're holding is the soul of the man. And they looked like basically, young babies with older faces and bird-like wings. And the Christian artist just literally took that and said, okay, from now on, this will be angels. Now, where did they get this idea of these beings with little bird-like wings? I think it went all the way back to Mesopotamia, and it would kind of distract us from your question to go into that. But let's just say that for instance, the sun god, Apollo, he had a halo behind him because he was a sun god. So they just said, you know what, let's grab that halo and put it behind Jesus. And that's how Jesus got his halo. Or,
Or in an artistic depiction, how do you differentiate the disciples or Jesus from anyone else in the painting
right.
who are not disciples? You have to, that's an indicator. All right,
That's
you
an
put a halo
indicator.
around them. Or how do you separate if in fact angels take human form as they do in the Bible? The three angels that appear before Abraham, and they're indistinguishable. They eat, they drink. How do you depict that in an artistic rendering? You differentiate the angels from the non-angels. Well, you give them wings. It's an indicator.
Yeah. So they took this Roman pagan art of, let's say, the Nikes. They literally took it and they just said, from now on, these are not Nikes anymore. These are angels. Then someone like Tertullian, a second century teacher, throws around this idea that every spirit possesses wings. It's a common property of angels and demons, he says. So that's how they get around very quickly. How do they fly? They have wings. And then comes this teacher, his name is Origen, and he creates this very spiritualized understanding of Christianity where everything is signs and symbols and allegories. And his student, St. Augustine, makes that idea and takes that idea and popularizes it in the entire Christian world. There is this huge infusion behind them from Greek Gnosticism, where Greek Gnosticism values the non-corporeal as the ultimate form of spirituality. So even though in the New Testament, Jesus comes back from the dead, like in the Gospel of Luke, and he says, look at my wounds. He says, I am not a ghost. I am not a spirit. I have flesh and bone. And you think, why would that be recorded in the New Testament? Because I think God was front running all of this. And then he
He
says, look,
also asks for something to eat.
and he says, give me food to eat, honey and fish. And they give it to him and he eats it to prove that it's really him come back from the dead, because, the Jewish people believe in the physical resurrection of the dead and the Messianic kingdom that was set from the city of Jerusalem
Right.
over
So,
the nations. And this
yeah.
is kind of what Gabriel says to Mary. So he goes out of his way to do this. But under the influence of Gnosticism, as Christianity spreads out of Israel, there is this infusion that no, the highest form of spirituality is non-physical. It becomes popular to believe that when Jesus ascended to God, he actually became a spirit at that point, even though there's already a spirit version of him, which is the Holy Spirit. There's already a spirit version of God. He's the son of King David, born of Mary, etc. And so Christians, when they die, they become spirits and they go to Jesus, who's a spirit. Again, not a biblical idea. Paul says that, we who are awake will not precede those who have fallen asleep. There is this resurrection of the dead at the second coming where we all get raptured in physical bodies and then rule on the earth. So this idea coming from Gnosticism begins to alter the concept of the world of angels. Quickly, we see Roman art and the Nikes coming in, which are transported to the soul, these boys with bird-like wings. We see teachers like Tertullian taking these ideas and popularizing it, but then with Origen and Augustine, it goes on steroids and becomes henceforth the foundation of the Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant thinking.
Right. So, which is not biblical.
Which is not biblical.
Angels are physical. They're not supernatural necessarily, just spiritual. They can be, I suppose, but they're also physical.
Yeah, in the Bible, the physical world is the spiritual world. So the physical world is the magnificent handiwork of God. David says there are constellations that are mentioned in the book of Amos and Job. There is in the 6 days, in the 7 days of creation, every day is counted blessed, even though it's talking about the creation of the physical world. Comes back from the dead as in a physical form. He's the most spiritual thing in the Bible. And then he comes back to the earth with an armada and sets up a kingdom. Like, let's say, for instance, in the book of Zechariah, where there's the Zechariah chapter 14, the last chapter of Zechariah is a camera lens into the second coming, the last moment of history. And first of all, it says that when all the enemies that gather against Jerusalem, their eyes, are evaporate, their tongue evaporates. Whatever God does to them, it has this feeling of, their bodies evaporate. Then it says that God sets up a kingdom out of the city of Jerusalem, and once a year, on one of the appointed days of Moses' calendar, the Feast of Tabernacle, every nation from all the people who survive this, it says, has to send an ambassador to Jerusalem. Now, let's say you're one of the saints of Australia, because and how do you get to Jerusalem? Do you go through a portal? Do you go to a fisherman's boat? Do you get on a hover? How do you get to Jerusalem exactly? Whatever it's going to be. So the church let go of the physical world, let go of the importance of Israel, let go of the fact that there's going to be this concrete unfolding and a physical kingdom, all under the influence of St. Augustine. St. Augustine put the story of the spiritual war into another realm. And he said, no, Israel is irrelevant. We are now living in a war of spirits. Every man and woman all around the earth who receives Christ, and every Roman citizen who becomes a Christian, this is how the kingdom is spreading. And as long as we keep, teaching this to the whole world, as the entire world eventually comes to God, eventually the Lord comes and takes us into the world of spirits, which is called the heavenly Jerusalem, where as spirits we will live with Jesus and his angels, who are all spirits. This becomes the foundation of the thinking of a church at the time where it is not separated into branches. There's only one.
Okay.
When it does get separated, these ideas never get challenged until today, where we're confronted with God is removing the veil, and we're going, wow, and we're returning in a way to a more biblical perspective, where we're seeing what Elijah left the earth with a chariot, and the angels, the chariots of Elohim, are at Mount Sinai. And it's, wow, that word is actually a word rechev, which means vehicle in Hebrew. Whoa. And now the UFO phenomenon, the evidence of it, the abductions, the book of Enoch, knowledge was passed down, which is like science, architecture, astronomy, celestial mechanics. Wait, the angels operate according to the laws of the creation like us. They are knowledgeable about how God's universe, even the word universe is in the Bible, Shemaim, and that's the word heavens. And even though the Bible talks about the world in which we live, we have decided that no, it speaks about a different world, but that's not what the word heavens in the context of the passages where it's used in the Bible. So there's been this spiritualizing of the world of God and angels, which is not in agreement with the Bible. And instead of giving the angels these vehicles, we have put bird-like wings on them, like Tertullian, and sent them off. So there's a lot of distortion coming from Christian history, but I would say St. Augustine is the central character that if I have to pin it on one guy, I have to pin it on Augustine. Yeah.
All right, we'll take a quick time out. Ali Siaditan, UFOs, Angels, and Gods. Ali Siaditan from Think Again Productions and his landmark documentary, UFOs, Angels, and Gods, which came out 17 years ago, but I had an opportunity to look at it again today for the first time in probably 15 years with a pair of fresh eyes, and it is just as poignant and important, perhaps even more so, when you look at the events that are happening, whether it's this ramping up of the UFO ET disclosure movement and so forth, UFO sightings, reports from military whistleblowers about claims of a U.S. UFO retrieval program, people in Las Vegas talking or calling the police and 911, claiming that there are aliens in their backyards. What is going on here? How does this relate to the second coming of Christ, the the battle of good and evil, the war between the good angels and the fallen angels, the battle of Armageddon. So when we talk about the ancient alien theory, talk to me about that with this through the prism of the Bible.
So one day, when all this revelation was coming to us, there was I was also doing Bible study, and my mind was turning into the world of angels. And one day I came up the stairs, and a gentleman says to me, I know where the throne of Satan is. And I'm like, where's the throne of Satan? He says, oh, it's in Pergamum. I'm like, how do you know that? He says, well, it says that right here. And he opens the Bible to Revelation chapter 2, where Jesus points out that the throne of Satan is in Pergamum, this city in Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. It was part of the Greek world at that time. And I'm like, really? So, I'm a graduate student at U of T. I go looking for this city, and my research takes me to the library of the Royal Ontario Museum, where I read about Pergamum and Carl Human, this guy who excavates the altar of Zeus. And he writes in his notes that if there was anything that Christ would have been talking about, it must have been this altar of Zeus. I photocopy that and I bring it back, because this was in the days of, this is 1997, and there is no like photocopy. We still do stuff like that. So I photocopy it, I bring it back, and I said, look, this is the guy who excavated this altar of Zeus thinks that this is what Christ was mentioning, because this was a very important altar. There were sacrifices being offered there nearly 24/7, and from all of the Roman Empire. It was like a holy city to the Romans. And Zeus, in fact, in the Revelation chapter 2, Antipas is mentioned, the bishop of the congregation of Pergamum. He is sacrificed on the altar of Zeus because he's charged with monotheism, because he's undermining the spiritual forces that are behind the emperor. And they put him in a bull, a brazen bull, a bronze bull that represents Zeus, and they cook him. And then the idea is that as he screams and cries, the bull comes alive. Church historians record it doesn't scream and cry. He prays for his congregation until the end. And then, we were thinking, well, this gentleman, he said to me, why would the Lord connect the head of the fallen angels, like Satan, to the head of the gods in the Greek pantheon? Is God making a connection for us between the gods and the fallen angels? Is that what's coming through here? And I thought, that's an interesting idea. So I kind of dove into to see what I could find about the gods. Now I knew they were mythological beings. That was the belief that I had in my head. And there wasn't a lot of people I could read about, but there was one of these ancient astronaut theorists that actually was really taking a deep dive into this whole concept of the gods, and that was Zecharia Sitchin. Even though I didn't care so much for his perspective and his theory, but I thought maybe I could extract some interesting, facts and information from the stuff he had dug up. And so I discovered that, yes, it seems that there was a tremendous amount of writings from our ancestors in the libraries of Mesopotamia that clearly said that the incredible knowledge at the basis of sudden civilization was attributed to revelation that came from these beings. They were called the Eloni. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. Now that my mind was opening up to the fact that this UFO thing was real, and that's just, there's these angels in the Bible and they have chariots. Could it be that these beings are real? And then when I decided to make the documentary, I took the deep dive in the Bible, and I had a program that allowed me to search every word in the Bible. And I did that. And I put the word gods in to see what it would spit out from the Old and New Testament. I honestly thought it would be like a few words, a few pages. And the printer kept printing and printing and printing. And I've never counted how many verses. Every time I count, I think around 700, verses. I stopped counting. But these were the handouts. And as I sat down and read them all in one shot, and I realized, wow, it says, for instance, that God stands in the congregation of the mighty. He judges among the gods. Or the gods are told, to worship and worship him, worship God. They're admonished. They're told to worship God. Or God is referenced as the leader of them, like in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 17, he's the God of gods. In the story of the Exodus, God comes and judges the gods of Egypt as the spiritual forces behind the Pharaoh. the gods are admonished, and it says, "Worship him, all ye gods." And I thought, wow, this is, I mean, this is only a few passages. As I sat and read all the verses in one shot, it was like a scale fell off my eyes, and I realized, wow, the Bible also speaks of these beings as though they were real. And so I noticed that, there was kind of a little number on top of each word. And I thought, what is this number? Like, it was the number 430. I looked it up in the same program. It was a Strong's Hebrew English Dictionary, and it said Elohim. That was the Hebrew word for it. I was like, oh. So I looked up that word, and I realized, oh, that's the word that also means God, and yet it's applied to these plural beings, which are over the nations. I thought, that's interesting. Then I saw that it said, for instance, the Lord God is the God of gods, and I noticed that above the word Lord there was a number. I looked that up, and it said Yahweh. And then when I looked up the word God of gods, it said El. So now I could read in Hebrew, Yahweh is the El of the Elohim. And my eyes just went, and I realized, oh, not only God is presented as the leader of these beings, but now I see why Moses said to him, "What is your name?" When I go back, he's saying, "Which one of these guys are you?" And he says, "I am Yahweh." He declares his name to Moses. And so now I saw God as the leader of these beings. And I thought, wow, where is this? Is there a foundational scripture? And so as I was sitting there, the words of Chuck Missler came to my mind. Chuck used to say that he would do a study of the word sons of God throughout the scriptures. Then he would say, there is one more passage where the word sons of God is mentioned, but you have to read it in the Greek, in the Septuagint. And that's in Deuteronomy 32, verse 8 and 9. And I was like, really? So I went to the same program. I looked, it had the Septuagint. I looked it up, and then there it was. And that verse was interesting. It said that when God divided the earth, and he created the boundaries of the various nations, he did it according to the number of the sons of God. And Jacob he chose as his own inheritance. So not only there was a physical divide between Jacob and the nations, but there was a spiritual divide, that verse declared. And even though Chuck would just mention that and move on, as another passage where the sons of God are mentioned, these angelic beings that created the Nephilim, that was his line of thinking. In light of this revelation, that the word Elohim referred to not only God, but these spiritual beings behind the nations, that passage became very important. It was the key root passage that explained, well, how is it that these beings had ended up behind the nations? Why is it that Jacob had this spiritual force behind it? And immediately I saw two other passages came to my mind and came alive. One was the story of the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece, as this angel comes to speak to Daniel, the prophet, in Daniel chapter 10. People can look it up. And the conversation between Satan and Jesus, where Satan says to Jesus during the temptations, "Dominion has been given to me over all the kingdoms of the earth." And I thought, wow, and that's where it comes from. That's how he got this dominion. Now I had the building blocks of my documentary because I had prayed to God. Chuck Missler and this other gentleman, John Peel, that I'd interviewed, they said that, the lie could be this idea of good cop, bad cop, where Satan deceives the world by presenting Jesus as an invading alien force and rallies, the nations against him. And I thought, well, when is it in the Bible that nations had been deceived? Where can I find that in the Bible? So I'm going to say that in a documentary to people. I need to have some biblical proof. And I think in answer to that prayer, God opened all this up to me, because then I went back to study really what these beings had done, and I realized they had set up entire paradigms over various nations. They had given the codes of civilization. That's why it says in the back of the DVD, all the civilizations attribute their genesis to the gods. They had given the matrix that formed the basis of the worldview of various nations and civilizations. They were not visiting our world. We were living in the world that they had created. God had seeded the earth with life, and then seeded the life with knowledge. And these beings that were behind the nations, that were called the gods of the nations, Elohim Hagoim, they were what Christians call the fallen angels, even though that term doesn't exist in the Bible. It's a term of Christian culture. The terms in the Bible for fallen angels is Elohim Hagoyim and Bnei Elohim, the sons of God. So this allowed me to see that, okay, what the ancient astronaut theorists saw as essentially ancient accounts of ET, and they saw the modern UFO phenomenon as a modern account of ET. I now, through these verses, could now see that these ancient forces behind the nations, from India to Mesopotamia to Egypt, etc., these were in fact the gods, or what Christians call the fallen angels, and that's why I put it in the title of the documentary. But it all started with the altar of Zeus and the character of Zeus. That was the key. That kind of went, really? Is there a connection? And that led to this discovery. Then in 2006...
Okay, I got to jump in here because
go
I got
ahead.
to get to a commercial. Ali Siaditan stays with us. Back with more in a moment. Ali Siaditan stays with us. Think Again Productions, the landmark documentary, UFOs, Angels, and Gods. So we were talking about the gods of the ancient world and the age of empires and so forth. So bringing that up to the modern day UFO ET phenomenon starting around 1947, how was it that then the ancient gods were able to rebrand themselves as extraterrestrials?
Yes, so the Lord comes and then he sends his Holy Spirit, and the age of the gods ends, but God said there would be a final empire, there would be a comeback. The days of Noah, the days of the Exodus, these are templates of the end times. So the scientists, Copernicus, Francis Bacon, Galileo, Newton, these guys essentially change our perspective from a biblical view of the creation, like we're not in the heavens and on the earth, but we are in the universe. What's the universe? Galileo's like, well, I'll tell you, look through my telescope, we'll analyze it. But actually, a lot of these guys had the connections with the mystery school and secret societies and Masons, especially Galileo and Newton. Francis Bacon wrote the New Atlantis. And people don't realize that science has its origins in mystery and magic, actually. And even in the book of Enoch, we see the angels speak science. These fallen angels speak science into the world to alter our perspective and deceive us. So suddenly we see ourselves as creatures that are not in the biblical heavens, which is a word for the universe, but we are in this secular scientific thing called the universe. And then Darwin comes and he populates it. Not only did we evolve here, but other beings evolved elsewhere. So when these guys make a reappearance, as God said that they would in the end of the age, and by the way, the UFO phenomenon begins in the same year that Israel becomes a nation, 1947, 1948. So there's a prophecy being fulfilled that ushers in the birth pang years that, turn this age of history into the next age of history, like we're giving birth to the next age of history. At the same time, these guys arrive, and now they can present themselves as characters of this secular scientific worldview that has taken centuries to be made. So these guys have been planning this for a long time, because they inspired this idea into the culture, rebranded the creation, because the Bible tells us this is the heavens, we are the earth, and this is the host of the heavens, we the host of the earth. So when you take the spiritualization and turning angels into these magical creatures that have nothing to do with our universe and our world, and then you have this idea that comes from the mystery schools that we're not in the heavens, but we're in the secular universe, these two ideas distort our perspective of reality to the point where it allows this phenomenon to appear as brand new, as rebranded in the Darwinian secular world as alien. And this then allows them to eventually, this is where it's going, I'm more confident than ever before, to rebrand even the Lord and his angels as aliens. And I can see, unfortunately, a moment where we're getting close to all of this, the Lord is on his way, and Christians are saying, oh no, don't worry about it. It's got nothing to do with Jesus and the second coming. Actually, we've made contact with aliens. And the world leader is helping us because he's got the backing of the good guys, and apparently there's bad guys. The same way we overcame COVID and other things, we're going to now overcome this cosmic issue. We're about to be brought into a larger, it's got nothing to do with religion and Jesus. Even Christians might say that because they live in that Augustinian distortion. So the birth of the modern scientific age allowed us to see aliens in the sky, and the spiritualization of angels pushed the biblical angels into a mythological world, and the combination of these two opened the window of distortion that is the basis of the deception. So we have to reclaim the biblical worldview in which we will see these guys as the fallen angels rallying the world against the second coming of Christ.
And the second coming of Christ, part of the deception will be that in culture, we will be told that when, Jesus descends in a cloud,
Yeah,
the second it comes as
right.
the second coming, that will be, we will be told that that is an actual alien invasion.
I think so. I think that's the lie. We put that as a conjecture because it was on the heart and minds of some Christians who were interviewing, but as we're getting closer to it, as I said, even right now, the alien myth, the alien deception, we're being told that there's good and bad guys. Already that, specification is being injected in the narrative, that there are two sides. Even my friend who's just new to all this, he said, apparently there's two sides. And so I'm like, yeah, there are two sides actually. They shoot at each other, and that's why there's UFO crashes, perhaps, because there's a war in the heavens. And yes, they've been giving us technology and knowledge all the way back since the days of Noah. And I think the bodies of knowledge mentioned in the book of Enoch are templates. They give us military knowledge. Why are they giving us the military knowledge to create modern crafts and modern computing? Because I think they're preparing us. You look at the story of Daniel, there are two angels fighting, one from God, one from the world, and they are matched in strength. To the point where the angel that came from God has to ask for backup to get released and come and deliver his message of scriptural importance. So there has to be a matching of strength, or there can't be a war, right? So I think these guys are arming us. They're giving us the knowledge we need. And also it's about endearing themselves. Like Dr. Greer says, oh, they're going to give us ways of turning salt water into drinking water very cheap, very so that we all can have great. So they're because the Antichrist, it says, is going to do lying signs and wonders. We put that story in the documentary from Fatima, where the Mother Mary, the Queen of Heaven, makes an appearance, but apparently people saw silver discs and then they experienced miraculous healings. It comes with lying signs and wonders in order to endear people. And I think it comes with bodies of knowledge that not only alter reality, but prepare the world for the war of angels, for us to actually be able to have one, like so many of the prophets of the Bible have foreseen. So this is very important. It's not about the crashes I'd explain in these two ways: the result of war of the angels, and if there's any technology being given back for us to back engineer, it's because it has these two purposes: endear themselves and prepare us for Armageddon.
And then, so in order to co-opt us into fighting in Satan's army against the return of Christ and his army of angels, we'll be on the wrong
Exactly.
side. We'll be on the wrong side. How do we, once again, how do we screen UFOs, Angels and Gods? How do we subscribe to the YouTube channel and all of that?
So go to my website, thinkagainproductions.com, watch the documentary for free and share it. Become partners with us in the fight against deception. Donate. You can leave a donation of any amount at the bottom. It's free, but help support us through a donation. We're not selling it. And you can then also donate monthly if you want to, but it's up to you. It can be a one-time thing. There's a YouTube page. Double click on it, and it'll take you to my YouTube page. There's tons of videos and more being uploaded all the time. If you want to listen to an audio series on the Book of Revelation and support the work, join us on Patreon, patreon.com/thinkagainproductions. And finally, at the end of this year, I'm going to Israel to do a tour of biblically important sites. It's a very powerful experience, a very spiritual experience. Imagine staying by the shores of the Sea of Galilee, coming out at night, looking at the stars and reading those passages of communion with God and bringing that blessing into your life when you come back home. So if you want to come, there's still room on the tour. You got to let me know by the end of July, beginning of August. But I can send you all, email me now, and I can send you all the information to look at. Thank you.
Ali Siaditan, thinkagainproductions.com. All the links are in the episode notes. Ali, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Richard, for having me.
Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there.